My boyfriend won't open up to me because he's been watching too many alpha male podcasts. I've been with my boyfriend for about 3 years now. The relationship has been great for the most part except for his inability to talk about negative emotions. He's the sort of guy to just fob it off constantly. He watched a lot of these alpha male podcasts and tells me only weak men express emotions. He mentioned before that he hasn't spoken about anything like this except for with his mother years ago. My friends have, to my dismay, referred to him as a robot to me. I obviously shut them down straight away. I'm quite introverted myself, therefore I struggle to make him feel like I'm a safe person for him to be vulnerable with. I don't know the right things to say. He has a real mental block on being able to talk about these negative things in his life. During arguments he's described as a ball in his throat whenever he tries to and is simply unable to. I've never seen him cry. When I can see he is visibly down I try and encourage him to share with me, but he just lies and says nothing is up. His family just found out that his mother has cancer, late discovery, and treatment isn't going to do anything. It came as a real shock to them and I know it's affecting my boyfriend majorly. She was the only person he's ever been vulnerable with and now soon she'll be gone. Then he'll have no one. I love this guy so much and want to be able to be there for him as he is for me. I was at work when they found out and by the time I got home he had already left to their house. I've spoken to him on the phone and he sounded unbelievingly rough. He's due to be coming back here tonight. I think now is really a make or break time to show him he can be vulnerable with me. I think if he goes through this bottling everything up alone then he's never going to feel comfortable expressing himself like that. I'm really nervous about how to handle this being introverted myself. Are there certain things I should say? That I should do? What would you like your spouse to do if you were in this situation? I genuinely believe that once he's managed to speak once he's going to find it much easier to do in the future. Update: my boyfriend won't open up to me because he's been watching too many alpha male podcasts. Earlier this week his family found out that his mother will be passing very soon. As in potentially a couple of weeks even. It came as a surprise to all of them. I asked for advice on another sub earlier in the week about how I can make him feel comfortable being vulnerable around me. I'm rather introverted myself so I was worried I would mess it up. Some kind people commented other types of intimacy I could try instead of words. One that stuck out to me was offering to wash his hair. Well, when he eventually came home he looked rough as anything. I'd already made dinner so we sat down to eat it, but we pretty much ate in silence. He rarely even looked up from his food. I asked if he wanted to talk and again he fobbed me off. Once we'd finished I asked him if he'd like to shower with me. It would have been a couple days at least since he'd have been able to have one. I dimmed the bathroom lights and put some relaxing music we both enjoy on the speaker. Got the shower nice and hot, gently helped him undress and had him sit on the bench thing under the water while I finished undressing. I joined him on the bench and slowly washed him everywhere, taking breaks to rest my head on his or whisper something to him. I spent a while massaging his head as I washed his hair. I kept kissing him on the lips, forehead, neck and occasionally embracing him. Rubbed his shoulders and places I thought he'd be aching after being up and about for 2 days. There was nothing dirty about the atmosphere, it was a whole different type of intense intimacy, it's difficult to describe. He'd hardly said a word during all this and he looked like he could cry any minute. I wasn't sure what to say, I didn't want to pressure him into anything so I just looked him in the eyes, smiled and said it's okay. Once we were done we both sat there for a while on the bench under the water, not speaking, just enjoying each other's company. I kept running my hand up and down his back, across his cheek or head. Just trying to make him relax as much as possible. Once I dried him and myself off, we got into bed and I stuck the TV on. I was half watching it and half playing with his hair. I asked if he wanted to talk about anything and he shook his head. I could tell he was really upset despite him trying to hide it. Maybe 20 minutes later I could see him literally on the verge of tears. I rolled to my side and put my arms around him, pulling him into my chest. That's when he started. The tears began to flow and he sobbed and sobbed. He was squeezing me so tight sometimes it wasn't easy to breathe. I could feel the years of bottled up emotions flowing out. He continued crying harder and it broke my heart. He said something about his mum but I couldn't hear as it was muffled. Seeing the guy you love like that, clinging onto you as though you were going to leave whilst he let it all out, hurt my heart. I felt so bad for him I had some tears myself. I just held him tight and kept whispering how much I loved him, that it was okay, I'm here, I've got you, etc. Even when he eventually stopped sobbing he continued to have his arms wrapped around me so tightly with his face buried in either my stomach or chest. I continued just comforting him until he fell asleep. Usually I don't like cuddling when sleeping but that night I held him all night long. I just couldn't bring myself to let him out of my grip. It's hard to explain the way I was feeling during this, obviously terrible that he was going through this but at the same time I was so relieved. Is that weird? It was an emotional experience, seeing the guy you love more than anything show negative emotion on that level for the first time. I remember almost very detail of the night. It's etched in my memory. I haven't brought it up to him yet, I figured maybe it's best to let him talk about the evening when he feels ready. But then again I also want to be able to tell him that it was okay and a good thing he did. I think he's a bit embarrassed that it happened so don't know if he'll bring it up. I hope he does though. I've read some women say that once they've seen their man cry they lose attraction. It seems bizarre to me, if anything I feel even more attracted to him than before. It's like it has amplified my love for this man. I never want to let him go. Thanks for listening to me, I'm sorry it's so long, I perhaps could have made it shorter but I thought everything in here helps paint the best picture of the evening and therefore helps anyone in giving me accurate advice. I just needed to share it with at least one person and there is no way I would speak to anyone we know about my boyfriend's vulnerability. Update 2, my boyfriend won't open up to me because he's been watching too many alpha male podcasts. I got mixed messages when it came to talking to him about it. Someone suggested a text or a note which seems kind of in the middle so I went for that option. I left a little note on his bedside table before I went out on Sunday. I outlined that I enjoyed our shower time and spending intimate time together like that. I said that I don't expect him to bring it up if he doesn't want to, that I know how hard it is for him to speak about those things, but I'll be here for him if he ever does. If he decides that he wants to write something, I'll read it, that I love him more than he can ever imagine. I said that I'd like him to feel free to ask me if I can shower with him whenever he needs. A Redditor pointed out that calling the whole act an easier name to say may make him more inclined to let me know when he wants to do it again. I didn't expect any response from him on the topic. Later that evening though, he handed me a small note before going into the other room to play his game. I won't go into details as it was only for me to read, but one line stood out to me the most. I don't have the words to express my gratitude, but I think you know. Thank you for making me feel human for the first time in so many years. A shower again sometime would be pretty cool, I guess. The whole thing was so sweet I cried a few happy tears. I'm dreading his mother's passing, but I'm hoping he'll let me be there for him, even if it's just a shoulder to cry on, and maybe, just maybe, we can have some more shower time because my God, I love it. Update 3, my boyfriend won't open up to me because he's been watching too many alpha male podcasts. Well, some of you may have seen my previous regarding my boyfriend's mom's illness and my attempt to comfort him despite him being rather emotionally constipated all his life. Despite our experience the previous night, he didn't really show any emotion or want to be comforted in the previous weeks. I suspect he may have been slightly embarrassed about that evening. Whilst I reassured him about it, I didn't want to push the subject and make him regret doing it in the first place. Unfortunately, a few days ago his poor mom passed away. I managed to see her a couple of days before and my boyfriend saw her the evening before. Once he found out, he shut himself in his office for hours. I tried knocking several times but never got a response. I could hear him moving around in there, so I knew he was physically okay. Late in the afternoon he eventually came out and sat down with me to watch TV. Neither of us said anything, but he looked rough as can be. I placed my hand on his knee and we both just sat there watching. I was kind of panicking because I couldn't think of anything to say that would make any difference to his pain. I got him to eat something and we just sat there. A couple of hours later he said that he was going to shower. Originally I just said all right, but then maybe 5 minutes later I realized that he probably wanted me to shower with him again but didn't feel comfortable asking. Kind of kicked myself for not thinking to offer him it earlier. Guess I was so caught up in thinking about what I should say that I completely forgot that I don't actually need to say anything but can show it instead. I undressed and joined him. It was a similar experience to the previous shower. It was a very intimate experience. Although I obviously don't enjoy the reason why we were doing it, I very much enjoyed taking care of him. Once we got out I again dried him off and I walked and tucked him into bed. Now this next part might be a tad controversial, but me and him both smoke weed occasionally. I normally will not allow any to be smoked in the house as personally I think the smell it leaves is unpleasant and grubby. On this occasion though I figured it would help him sleep and so got one of my pre-rolls. We both smoked it in bed whilst watching TV. He looked really upset and I was honestly surprised he hadn't cried so far. Some users previously mentioned that I asked if he was okay too much, so I made sure not to this time and didn't press it. I turned out the lights and we both tried to get some sleep. I could hear him sniffling a bit, so turned over and curled up against him in his arms. I didn't say anything, I just laid there with him. I fell asleep pretty quickly but my cat woke me up maybe an hour later and he was still awake. I moved up and swapped to being the one doing the holding. I rubbed his back and kissed his forehead. He just suddenly began crying. Not just the normal day-to-day tears you see from some people, these were heartbroken tears. I don't think I've actually ever witnessed anyone cry that hard in real life. It's a sound I never want to hear again. The pain he was feeling must have been insane. Again he buried his face in my chest and just cried and cried. I could literally feel him shaking. We were lying there for hours. I had my arms around him and one leg over him. He was squeezing me so tightly the whole time. He would occasionally drift off, loosening his grip on me in the process before waking up, starting to have some more tears and almost grabbing at me, pulling himself into me again. As though he was afraid he'd wake up and I wouldn't be there. It was heartbreaking. Every time I'd just squeeze him back and whisper that I'm there or something similar. I'd kiss his head and rub his back until he drifted off again. He never stayed asleep for long though. He properly fell asleep after maybe 3 or 4 hours of this drifting. And I stayed awake for maybe an hour past that just holding him. In the morning I woke up first and when he woke he lay there for a moment before the tears started flowing again. We stayed in bed all morning just embracing each other. A user mentioned before that two people, lying naked together being vulnerable is the ultimate intimacy and honesty. Now I couldn't agree more. I've never felt so close to someone. I was feeling so many emotions it was intense. He's cried in my arms a couple more times since at random points of the day. Whilst I'm obviously devastated for him I can't help but be so grateful he's willing to allow me to be there for him. Crying in daylight out of bed is a huge step from only allowing himself to do it once in a dark bedroom. I'm honestly honored that he trusts me so much. Hopefully he continues to allow me to be there for him in whatever capacity possible. Today I saw a TikTok video where a girl was mocking an ex for crying in front of her and it enraged me. I cannot begin to imagine how these people think like this, to have someone willing to be as vulnerable as possible in front of you, to be comfortable asking for help in their darkest hour and then turning around and mocking them for it. It's disgusting and I am so glad I am not one of these awful people. Anyway, that's it out. Just reading it back I can see how insanely long it is. I'm sorry. If you took the time to read, thank you. Don't need any advice, just helps me immensely to talk about this with someone.